Joining us now to talk about the future of European business is Max Ahrens, CTO of T-Systems. Hey Max, how are you doing?
Hey Tim, good.
Good to see you again after day one.
Great to be back.
It's a pleasure for us to have you with us today. I'm looking forward to our talk today. It's going to be really exciting since we have two more guests joining us now. And our first guest is Rafael Laguna de la Vera, Director of Federal Agency for Disruptive Innovation, SprinD. Hey Rafael, how are you doing? We're not able to hear you right now, but I guess our audience was able to hear you and our crew is already on it. So thank you very much for joining us, Rafael. And there is our next guest, Paulin, CEO of OVHcloud. Hey, Michel, how are you doing?
Hey, I hope everything is doing very well for everybody, and I'm very excited and very pleased to be invited by Max for this talk. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure for us to have you guys with us. So thank you very much. Maybe you can tell us very quickly what is SprinD and what is OVHcloud. That would be great.
All right, I hope you can hear me now.
Yes,
SprinD is a federal government agency. Yeah, you can? Okay, great. A federal government agency that I'm building, which is here to sort of like DARPA did back in the days in the US, DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Some of you may know that DARPA actually invented the internet. And the question is, why don't we have such inventions in Germany anymore? We're still living off the disruptive innovations that we've done 120 years ago. And the agency is here to find new inventions that keep us alive and wealthy for the next 100 years.
Sounds good.
Yeah, just to illustrate, OVHcloud is an European cloud operator with a global footprint. We have 32 data centers in 4 continents, and we own and operate our own network, and we provide private and public cloud solutions to our customers and partners with key distinctive points. Of course, it's related to our talk today. We provide open, trusted, reversible solution with the European DNA of data protection and data sovereignty. We have also a unique sustainable industry model because we built and designed our own servers, and we have developed unique water cooling technologies which allow us to reduce energy consumption and water consumption. And thanks to this unique sustainable industry model, we provide, we believe, the best price performance and predictable pricing. But last and not least, we have a very active and dynamic ecosystem of partners, SaaS editors, VARs, which share our DNA. And we have a very strong partnership with T-Systems. We are very proud of it. And we are very committed to the open source initiatives.
Great.
In conclusion, a European player with a complete offering of open, trusted, reversible cloud solution around the world.
All right. So, Rafael, there is obviously a lot of talk on sovereignty, but what is it actually? Maybe you can tell us more about that.
Basically, it's having control over what happens to your systems and to your data, knowing what's going on inside those systems. I think that transparency is key to the services that you cater. We've seen a lot of mishaps with data, some of them unintentional, some of them intentional. And by the way, we don't know 99% of what's going on. The iceberg is very big underneath. So to create sovereignty means creating the ability for you to act and know what's happening with your systems and with your data. And I think that's paramount to your ability to make decisions.
I also think, building on what Rafael just said, right? When I talk to the clients, the sovereignty concept is nothing new, right? Clients in the that have a production line, clients that produce goods, know that for a long time that you need to control your value chain. You need to be able to be in control of who delivers the parts to you, and that is along the needs of your end product. And I think car manufacturers are, masters in this. They produce the smaller parts of the overall product, but nobody would ever debate and ask, oh, can't I buy a car from Continental, right? So it's a very good way of managing your value chain. And if you want to build digital products, and the majority of the future products will be digital, you need to be able to control the value chain also there. And that means sovereignty around the data, because digital products rely on data, and sovereignty around the technology that you use, so that you are in control of the technology elements that make up your digital products. And that's why I think we also see such a massive interest in this topic, right? It's not a political topic. I mean, it's the politicians are also interested in it because the sovereignty concept is very much, also something which is relevant for us as citizens. But whenever I talk about it with our clients, it's a topic that gets top interest because this acceleration towards digital offerings. And I think that's why we are building something which is important going forward, especially.
But let me be blunt here. Isn't data or digital sovereignty a bit overrated? I mean, after all, many companies already host their data and services with the large hyperscalers, right? Rafael, maybe you can tell us something about that. Well, that wasn't intended, but I think Rafael liked it.
No problem.
Small jingle.
Only for you, Rafael.
Thanks. I'm feeling good. I'm coming on stage again. Well, is it overrated? It's a little bit like seeing old movies in the 60s where everybody smokes, right? And so you feel like, okay, everybody's smoking. It cannot be unhealthy, right? Of course, you live and learn. And by doing so, you understand the dangers of things, maybe even after you've started using them. I think sovereignty, you can think of it as dials, your desire for sovereignty. For example, if you have a very short-lived service that only displays public data, your need for sovereignty is probably low. And you can deploy it anywhere you like because the data is public anyway, it's not going to live for long. Complexity of your system. If the complexity of your system is high, it will be very hard to switch away from the system. So your bargaining power, your negotiating power will be very low when things happen that are not in your favor. So the more complex your system, the higher is your desire for sovereignty, for you not to lose that power. Data sensitivity, obviously. You don't want to be the Netflix, the next Netflix, where your infrastructure provider becomes a competitor and knows everything about your business because you've been running your business on the infrastructure provider. So you want partners that don't become your competitors. So you have to look at the sensitivity of your data. If you're a government, of course, if you're the defense department, your data sensitivity is very high. But also, if you're Deutsche Telekom, your sensitivity is very high because you have customer-specific data and you know a lot about your customers and the mobile networks and so forth, and you don't want that data to fall into the wrong hands. And then, of course, the importance of that data and the systems for your business. If it's core to your business, you need full control over your fate, over your destiny. If your service provider goes down, you need to be able to switch. You want redundant multi-cloud solutions that always run and not depend on one single supplier. So those are the dials. And if one of those dials, is dialed up, you probably have a high need for sovereignty of your systems. And of course, if you want sovereignty, you will pay for it. Like if you want security, you will pay for it. It costs money. You have to think more. It's harder to accomplish, it's harder to achieve. But of course, once you know you need it, you will also be willing to pay for it. Of course, the other part is, this is infrastructure. I mean, we're switching to a digital world, and all the service that we're using are infrastructure like roads and containers and boats and trains. Right? And you need control over the infrastructure that you're using. Imagine being a producer of some goods and putting your goods into a container. And then you lose total sight over what's happening with your container. You don't know who's looking inside your container. And when the container finally arrives at your customer's side, you don't know what has happened to the container on its way. That kind of explains why you need sovereignty and transparency to know what's going on with your digital products, because you want to know what happens to your container. So I think there are some services that don't need that high sovereignty, but I think the majority does.
Michel, same question to you. Is it overrated?
No, not at all. We do believe that sovereignty is not overrated, but I think in the past it has been underrated. Our definition of sovereignty is not nationalism, is not practicism. Is definitely to give the capability to have freedom of choice and to be to master your destiny. And data now is a new Eldorado. There is a sort of now mix between our private life, our personal lives with the data. And it's often compared with the oil industry in the past. And so I do believe that data now has major implications. Of course, financial implications, technical implications. And we see that today data has a strong value, immense value, and is creating very powerful companies able to act sometimes as a monopoly on some subsegments. But also now we see for the states and for the companies that it's sort of strategic implications. How to protect sensitive data, how to protect patents, how to protect the heart of the value-added chain of the company. And clearly it's very important to see that sensitive data has to be protected, and they should become sovereign. But I think I will also mention that now we see that there is some ethical implication. Even the citizens are now asking questions about where are the data, how the data are used. And we've seen during the crisis and pandemic crisis, and we're still seeing that, especially for the health data, that now it's more and more important to know where are these data, how they are used, what is the ethical value of the data. So no, we are absolutely convinced that it's not overrated. It's really becoming a top issue, and it's in the past, it has been underrated.
All right, so you both advocate a stronger focus on sovereign solutions, but isn't there also a flip side to the coin for companies in Europe? Max?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think we're all on the same page when it comes to the importance of sovereignty, and that sovereign solutions are really a requirement going forward. But I believe there is a flip side, right? I think we need to make sure, and Rafael mentioned it already, there is a cost to it, right? And in order to make it the right thing, that's that we build sovereign solutions without kind of locking out the other solutions is, I think, the key here. And so what we don't want to do, what I believe is not the right way, is to say we have a solution which is a national solution, or national in the sense of Europe-wide solution, and it excludes other possibilities. That's why when we talk about the sovereign ecosystem, we really focus on making it integrated or accessible in an integrated multi-cloud fashion towards the existing ecosystems. Because in the end, no client, it's infrastructure, like said, right? We're talking about infrastructure, and nobody really, wakes up in the morning who's running a business who wants to digitize areas of the business and thinks first about infrastructure. The first thought is, what are the digital products? Which are the digital services I need to build to have, better services for my clients? And we want to have the best tools to do so. But the best tools is not necessarily in every sense the most technically advanced one, or the globally available one, or whatever. You have to have the right tool for the right problem, and that's where sovereign solutions come into play. So there is a flip side, especially if we move it over towards a model where we say, look, it's either that or you can't use anything else. It should be a customer choice in a multi-cloud environment, and sovereign cloud solutions must be connectable towards the existing platforms, making it a complement rather than a replacement of the existing ecosystems. And I think if we play that right, this is going to be great for the clients, because then they have another tool to choose for. And it's a real ecosystem in that sense, where they have one platform where they can build their digital products on top.
Yeah, good point. So can we do anything about this market power? Can we counter it somehow? Like, is GAIA-X the answer, Michel?
Oh, as Max mentioned, Europe today has many cloud providers, but sometimes they are small, and it's difficult to counter and to be able to be an alternative to the large, overwhelming platforms. And so we are absolutely convinced that the ecosystem, and especially the European ecosystem, which is completely in coherence with the DNA of openness in Europe, is a key answer. It will not be a standalone initiative. And we believe so that GAIA-X is one of the answer, is part of the answer. It's a joint project which is has been initiated in Germany, and now is supported by Germany, France, and new operant countries. And now we have also partners coming from outside of Europe supporting this. And we are absolutely convinced this is the best way to propose an alternative solution. Europe DNA is really based on interoperability and openness. It's not a sort of a bad copy of a hyperscaler platform. On the contrary, it's really a different alternative model. And OVHcloud, as a founder and a member of the board of GAIA-X, is really willing to bring our capacity, our server technology, our also open source based solutions in public and private cloud to the ecosystem, and to be able to propose alternative, powerful, and competitive solutions which are completely open, transparent, reversible, secure, trusty, and providing at the same time PaaS and SaaS infrastructure for Europe based on these very strong core values.
All right. Rafael, what's your view on that, as you are from a different sector, if I might say so?
Yeah, I was talking about the need of sovereignty for the systems that you're building, and obviously in government systems that need may be high by nature. So in a way, the public sector could very well be a market maker for such open, transparent, trustable systems. And I'm very happy that the government started the GAIA-X initiative to expose such an alternate model. Actually, the agency that I'm building, SprinD, has funded one of the sub-projects of GAIA-X called Sovereign Cloud Stack. That name resonates very well with what we're talking about here, which builds a completely open source stack out of components that exist and things around it for infrastructure and platform services that people like Michel can use to run infrastructure and platform service. So we're building sort of a very large community around this. We're putting government money into it to give providers the ability to provide infrastructure services in a very standardized way, because that by nature will be very compatible. It will be very multi-cloud capable. Right? It will sort of innovate a lot, because that's what open source does. Once an open source project becomes successful, it will drive a lot of innovation from all over the place, because it's not controlled by one single company. So I think governments play a crucial role in building out infrastructure ecosystems also in the digital world. And I think they're just now waking up to the fact that they are actually in charge.
All right. So, Max, GAIA-X is probably not going to be a European hyperscaler, but what exactly is it then?
Yeah. First of all, I really like what Rafael said, right? Because I think this is one of the rare occasions, basically, where the demand on public and private side really falls together, right? And where public need can be fulfilled with a solution which is equally important to the private sector. So leveraging that is really one of the key things that will happen over the next years. And I think that's also why there's so much interest in this, right? Because that will drive the acceleration of what Gaia solutions are really forward. But what is Gaia then, essentially, right? What is it? So technically, it's first of all, it's a non-for-profit organization that, like Michel said, 22 companies have first of all founded. Deutsche Telekom is also a founding member of it. So it's a non-for-profit organization that should not operate a service as like a hyperscaler, but it should do a few things. It should, orchestrate the community that builds code, like the Sovereign Cloud Stack project and others. So there will be coming code out of it, code that everybody can take and run and build a service out of it. It will, create a more clear standards also, that companies that want to use sovereign solutions, that they get transparency on what is actually sovereign to what degree, because the sovereign is not an on and off switch, right? It's a continuum, basically, where you need to make the right choice for the right thing. And it will run a few central services where you can find the different GAIA-X compliant platforms. And I think that's important, because also when you look at the technical architecture of what Gaia, or what, the technical trends, let's say, what we are building on I think is two very important things. We believe that the next generation of cloud platforms is moving to the edge, you have different form factors. Very much the first generation was dominated by a few global regions, and now it's already ongoing, right? It's happening since a while, but it's accelerating now that they are moving to the edge, they are moving to smaller markets and all these things. So you have more kind of places where you have platforms available. That's the one thing. The second key trend that we are building on is the move towards container-based platforms. So it's basically, without getting into too much detail, but the next generation of platforms will further decouple the hardware from the software layer, basically, and create a real software-only ecosystem. And the reason why that is happening is also because if you want to move to the edge, you need to have, you know, a more lightweight way of being able to deploy services on the edge. So, and this container trend is really something which is accelerating massively currently. And based on that trend, we can build a real ecosystem that is open, that is available in many places. But using Gaia, it will be consistent to some place, it will be transparent, and it will be openly governed. And I think that's one point I want to mention. Open source is very good, right? I'm a big fan of open source, like you know, everybody here. And I think also, you know, the hyperscalers and many of the technology advancements, especially in software engineering, so all the core innovation is open source. So open source is really the fuel for innovation here. But there's a difference between open source and open governance, because if you have an open source project, basically, and I control my open source project, I can control what's getting into the next release of that software version and whatnot. So if we want to have a truly open environment, we need to make sure that it's also openly governed in a transparent way. And that's something where I think Gaia can also help a long way to kind of be a focal point for these processes to happen. And that's how, in the end, it's not a hyperscaler, but it is it will still generate a sort of a more consistent ecosystem that is spread across multiple providers, which makes it for developers so much easier to build it and deploy in the different environments according to the sovereignty needs that you have for that specific workload. So that's what Gaia is.
Thank you very much. Great explanation. But why would I use it? Like Michel, why would I use a sovereign cloud based on Gaia? I mean, when you look at where industry giants are in the cloud right now, the question arises whether European companies need data sovereignty.
Oh yeah, I'm absolutely convinced today that companies need data sovereignty. First, because there is sensitive data. And today we are absolutely convinced that industries, but companies, individuals, but also of course the states, defense model, but even things are sensitive. And today we see that in outside of Europe, protection data is not the rule. And clearly, and moreover, some states are now putting legal instruments to have a capacity to provide extraterritorial capacity to extract data from some players. So we are absolutely convinced that even if you are a large company today, you need sovereignty. And moreover, we are absolutely convinced that it's a sort of long-term competitive attributes. Sovereignty is a freedom of choice. When you are trapped and locked in, and again, it goes back to the foundation of GAIA-X and the ambition of GAIA-X. When you are trapped in a lockdown or locked-in strategy where you have only a few players, which are all-inclusive model, it's really a major threat for the customers, for the enterprise, and multi-cloud should be the solution. But to do this multi-cloud efficient, you need to have a transparent model of reversibility and interoperability. And that's again why GAIA-X is so important, because it describes what should be the mechanism to really guarantee this transparency, to guarantee this interoperability. And therefore, we are absolutely convinced that this is something which will occur even long-term for any customers. And it's very important that we cooperate between all the providers, mainly, of course, based on open source. And really, I would like to emphasize the partnership we've made with T-Systems, because we believe that it's a unique opportunity to provide really alternative solutions with this transparency, openness, reversibility DNA of GAIA-X. And also, I just want to mention, we've made a partnership with Google Cloud, which might seem a little bit bizarre in the sense that it's an upper scaler solution, but I think it's the best of the two worlds. In fact, we use the container onto a solution that we integrate without any compromise, no compromise on the data sovereignty. And we are able to propose a disconnect model to propose the best of the two worlds. Technology, advanced technology, but at the same time, the safety and protection with the openness, reversibility, which are really what we want to propose in the GAIA-X initiative. So this is really something we want to participate. And for me, it's clear that it's very important that all the consumer, but also the players, the VARs, the system regulators understand, because I am absolutely convinced this is today, there is a rise. And we see today in our customer base and also prospect that data sovereignty is becoming a rising topic. And for us, it's we are very confident that, yeah, it's becoming very, very important topic for the future of the market.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. And I think I just building on a little bit on when I talk to our clients, and most of our clients are large scale enterprises, right? All of them run a multi-cloud strategy, right? All of them have different, look at these different cloud environments and make the choice of what area of the business, what area of, you know, the technology landscape is being best fit for one or the other ecosystem. And there are factors going in like, you know, do I have the skills? Do I have, what are the tools, the capabilities that this platform delivers? So starting point is everybody engages into a multi-cloud strategy, at least from the larger end of the client base. Then the second point is also important, is that although we are already in that for, you know, a good 10 years in the cloud journey, right? It is still early phases. We cannot forget that the majority of the existing workloads, but especially the majority of the future workloads, which is so much more potential there, right? When it comes to digitizing the business is still ahead of us. So the decisions that are being made today will have a lot of influence on how much sovereignty everybody has in the future, in the landscape, and the digital products of the future. So that is why it's a decision that I think people take very carefully and think through. That's why we're getting so much conversations about sovereignty today. But also a decision will, you know, not say, okay, I have made in the past a choice for a workload area A to run it on, you know, AWS or Azure. That doesn't mean that it's going to be for all the other things that are coming the right choice to be made. And what I also think is important, and that's where a lot of the focus is on when I think about what we want to do when we build sovereign platforms, is really around not only the very large enterprises, but also the ones that are, you know, mid-tier or even smaller, because they need to have easy solutions and the trust, which is an even bigger problem in my experience, to have the trust in these platforms when you're a smaller company, just because you don't have the highly skilled experts that can do the judgment calls easily. So you're more and more relying on the trust of your provider, and that's why I think it's so important that building sovereign platforms means also building them in an easy, accessible way, so that all sorts of companies can engage using them, and I think it's going to be a very interesting thing how it evolves, but our viewpoint here is really sovereign platform should not be the thing you go to if you need something more secure, but it should be really the thing you go to because it is better also for some of the things you do, right? And that's ease of use. That's when it comes to exchanging data, for instance. We're talking with a lot of clients that say, okay, look, I want to exchange data with people out of my value chain. Where are the tools, the technologies that I can trust and still that are easy to use? And these kind of dedicated areas, that's where the sovereign platforms will focus on, and then also just win because they are better for these areas, not overall, but for these areas.
Rafael, I saw a lot of nodding from your side. Would you like to add something to that?
Two things. One, maybe that hasn't surfaced enough yet. I was making this little joke about smoking. We humans are not very good in assessing the dangers of our today's decision in the future. If we don't get damage immediately, we're not very good at factoring this into our decisions today. I think we're at an epiphany, so to speak, of waking up, saying, "Oh wow, right? We're making some very important decisions here," and this is where this whole sovereignty topic kicks in. It's almost like risk assessment. This is why we have separate groups in companies and in government that make risk assessments for decisions, because you almost need to be outside of making that decision to assess the risk in a more, let's say, dry way of the risk of the future that we human beings tend to overlook. But what Max said is really important. Unless a solution is really good, people won't use it no matter what. So in a way, and the open source communities have been very good at building great systems, but they've not always been good at building easy to use systems. That's a huge disadvantage. And this is, I think, where companies like T-Systems and OVH and so forth come in, because you guys have to sort of orchestrate the work of the community into products that are easy to use, and you have to become part of that community for it to happen, and then it will happen. I mean, the good news is that open source communities are everybody sort of on the outside of the existing incumbents, which are many, many more people than inside the incumbents. So innovation can be at a much higher level, but it needs to be orchestrated. It needs to have a direction. And like Max said, if it's a guy or a girl somewhere making all these decisions for millions of people, it may not always be the best decision. This is where things like GAIA-X come in to surface this decision process, to create sort of a group that helps making the right decision. It's not always easy. We have to be, and Max knows that very well, and Michelle, because you've all been in all these GAIA-X meetings in the past 12 and 18 months, right? There's a lot of people, a lot of talking, a very exhaustive process, but I'm happy that we finally started going through this process. So in a way, I believe we are at a moment in time where we're waking up to the responsibilities that we have for the digital systems that we're building, and sovereignty is sort of the #1 topic that needs taken care of.
Yeah, but you just said it. There's a lot of talking going on. Max said it earlier. There's so many conversations like today, and everyone is just discussing over it. Isn't it finally time to stop discussing and do something? I mean, what will you, and I mean, you can tell it from your perspective, and SprinD do to accelerate everything?
Well, if you're asking me, you're asking a guy that has been doing this for 20 years. So I've been dedicating a good part of my life, founding companies, investing into open source companies, working in this field. No, it's absolutely time to do, but it is, I think, a very good economic decision to do so. It's an interesting, attractive business. Since OVH is here, they've been investing hundreds of millions of euros into building those platforms, and so has T-Systems and many others in the market. So I think from a just mere capitalistic standpoint, I think it's a good time to invest into sovereign technologies. Number two, if we want to retain the wealth of our nations here in Europe, if we want to retain our culture, that we've been building for the past few hundred years, I think we also need to build the innovations that drive our future, because innovations transport culture and systems. So in a way, I'm at an age where I think about the world for my children that I want to leave behind. We're building that world right now. So in a way, I'm motivated beyond just capitalistic motivations to engage in this field. And this, by the way, is why I've taken on the job at SprinD, building a government agency, because I believe that the government needs to put the money where their mouth is and invest into things like we did with Sovereign Cloud Stack and many others that you will see coming from the agency.
Just one sentence. First of all, Rafael, right? The thinking about the world for the children doesn't have to do anything with age. It starts with when you have kids. That's the moment when you exactly. Start thinking about it. So I do the same. But I also think when it comes to what needs to be done, right? And we touched on it a little earlier. I think we in Europe, we do have a lot of like smaller things that are going on. Smaller things, if you look at it on a global scale, like Rafael mentioned, right? We have large platforms like OVH is one of the top providers worldwide. But if I go to my clients and ask them, it's not that everybody knows them as well as others, right? So, but it's a great platform. It's globally available. All these things. That's why we partner with OVH. Same for us. So what we need to do better is also the demand that we have, also from the public sector side, right? To channel it in these platforms, because the money that's flowing in there will evolve these platforms faster. And I think many of the things that are happening on the, for instance, when the American government makes large procurement deals, that's a lot of money that's flowing into the system, and that means for me, it's a pure logical decision that this makes sense. You win the sovereignty, which is anyhow a concern, and you generate this ecosystem that you want to have as part of a suitable solution for not only for the government but also for the industry. And I think that is something that going forward will happen a lot, and doesn't mean that it's getting to one provider or the other. And that's the beauty of the way how the system has been set up, right? It's not like the whole, many of you will have followed in the press the whole discussion around the big contract that went, in the end, I think it went to Microsoft for the Department of Defense in the US. In this system, on this distributed system, let's say, in this, which is based on common stacks and common technologies, but still open, the money will flow to many partners, but still it will flow to those that support the values. And I think that's what makes it also the European solution, right? In the end.
Michel, I'm super interested to hear your view on that. Is it somewhat or different or exactly the same in France?
Oh, it's the same in France, of course. Unfortunately, we see that the demand for the market for data sovereignty, for openness, for reversibility, for transparency is the same. But I think the answer is not France or German, it would be European, clearly. And that's the reason why I do believe the GAIA-X initiative is really the example of what we need to do to be able to create alternative solutions. And to rebound of what Max and Rafael mentioned, I really do believe that now we are at the action level. And we try, as OVHcloud, for example, to show that by investing hundreds of millions of euros in R&D and in infrastructure, we are able to create this platform, a worldwide platform. We are based in Asia, we're based in North America, we're based in Europe, and we have data centers and networks and solutions across the globe. But also by be able to aggregate an ecosystem of solutions. And definitely the open source sometimes has been very good at technology, but not very good at usage and easy usage. And that's the reason why we're investing a lot, trying to create this platform, which will be an open platform, but at the same time will be able to aggregate these fantastic technologies we find in the open source communities. And the example I want to mention, we announced that we are going to propose to our customers, but also to the partners, to the VARs, a hub of AI solutions based on the same DNA of protection of the data that the customer will be allowed, and it will be an easy use and very simple way to use different studios, technologies or sectorials. So that's really what is our, I would say, what we need to do. At the same time, I just want to emphasize the point that Europe has also a responsibility, government, big enterprise, because in the US or in China, this model has been fueled by an ecosystem which has been virtuous for the champions. And we need to have exactly the same thing. It's not by hazard that today Chinese or American players are so strong. And because the government, the research institute, the universities, the funding with the banks, the venture, but also the order. When I may order, it's the public ordering, the public or the private ordering, fueled the growth of these players. And we need to put in place by regulations, but also by exemplarity, a model in Europe which will allow to aggregate through this collaboration And the partnership with T-Systems is really the illustration of what we try to do. The best of, top worldwide integrator like T-Systems with our technology, which will be able to propose alternative solutions to our customers. This is definitely what we try to do.
If I may just,
because
we've been talking about open source all the time, and I think we all believe, and if you look at the importance of open source is undeniable. But I think looking at how the open source ecosystem will evolve going forward from here is interesting, because, and I get to know that a lot when I talk to our clients, right? That in the past, clients were users, predominantly users. They used the technologies and they liked the open source technology, or they didn't care, but they were users. Now with the rising capabilities within every company to build own digital products and having development teams, having teams that actually create infrastructure for other development teams in the companies, certainly suddenly we have what I will call, I think we are on the brink of the next era of open source, where there's much more a diverse environment of people that contribute to these projects, from both actually using companies and companies that supply services offerings. And that makes it also so important that when building these platforms and building these technologies, that we work together, for instance, with OVH in a triangle. That's what we do, right? We work with technology providers, with people like us that have SI capabilities, global operations, but then we integrate the clients and we really co-innovate with the clients on what are the things they need to solve these problems, where these sovereign platforms can help. And then the clients don't only give answers, but co-innovation means they have own development skills where they add capabilities towards the solutions, but they need to find a home as well. And that's when the open source concept finds its beauty, because only if it's an open source solution where the code contributions from the clients come in, we can operate that as part of the ecosystem, and that's what the client wants. And there are many examples where we work, for instance, and I'll just mention one. We are intensively working to build out a connector solution, which is based on open source, which is based on standard from the International Data Spaces Association, where it's all companies contributing, us, but also the automotive companies, for instance, in that sense, in that case, to build a solution that's fit but available to everybody and easy to use. So I think this next generation of open source is going to be different, and I think if we are successful, we make sure that we really take the power of the actual end users and take it in this agile, customer-centric innovation process to integrate it. And then I think this is where open source will shine even more compared to the past. And that's why I'm so looking forward to that. I'm so optimistic also about this being a super opportunity going forward.
Yeah, I got a few chat questions. Maybe we can just get these done first, and then I would love to get back to something Michel said earlier. So one question from the chat was, do you see any possibilities to make the hyperscaler environments more data sovereign? Rafael, maybe that would be interesting for you to answer.
Yeah, sovereignty can be achieved by transparency, and transparency in digital systems is created via open source. Now, the hyperscalers systems are using a lot of open source inside. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's probably 90–95% of it. I would hope for them to go, all in and open source 100% of what they are using, and that would create 100% transparency. I have a hard time believing that from a legal framework we can create so much trust that closed systems would deliver the same level of sovereignty. I think we have a lot of legal hiccups that are totally unresolved. GDPR and the Cloud Act are by nature incompatible, and Schrems 1 and Schrems 2 have proven to us that this is the case, and there is no solution. So waiting for the lawyers to fix it, I don't think will fix it. I think GAIA-X will deliver a great role model for that, and SCS, as part of its sovereign cloud stack, will deliver a role model for that. I think that's the way to go. Full transparency doesn't require trust or any legal hooplas to create the transparency needed for sovereign systems.
If I may, I would, because I think something I said earlier is also of importance here. There is no on and off, right? It's not sovereign or non-sovereign. So there is that's a spectrum that will happen. And one of the things that we need to do with also where I put hopes into Gaia is to create transparency of the level that is available in each of these platforms. I think, and I'm very optimistic also that the hyperscale platforms will adopt towards the customer needs, because it's a clear, my understanding talking to the clients is clearly there is a need. So the platforms will evolve and make sure that these needs are covered more and more. And that's how also what Michel mentioned, a partnership with Google and OVH makes sense, right? Because there is, and in my words, I always separate out data sovereignty and technology sovereignty where this is a solution that's fully data sovereign, right? Because it's owned and run by OVH, but it's not fully technology sovereign, because the technology stack, the Anthos stack on top of that, is something that is partially owned by Google, right? So it's not fully open source. And that's how, that shows you that you go a long way, but there are still, further, escalations, as if you like. And that's how we will look at the end also at different solutions, because not the most sovereign solution is always the right one. But for some cases, when we talk about defense, when we talk about these cases, this will be the right one. And then you go all the way, but you can also scale it back. But I also believe, and I'm a big, I really like that also the core global hyperscaler platforms will more and more filter these needs that European customers have towards down and change their platforms underneath. And for me, that's good. That's good news, because it will help our clients also to accelerate their ways into the clouds and get the benefits out of it and digitize their business, because that's ultimately what everybody should do.
Great.
May I just
sure.
add a point on that, Tim, if I may? Just to say that I think as a hyperscaler, as a cloud operator, for me, there is a structural incompatibility. As Rafael mentioned about the GDPR, about the Cloud Act, about the SprinD, and sometimes about the capability to have access to the data, to use this data, is something which, for me, as a sort of ethical view and a DNA view, is incompatible with the European and the sovereignty per se. However, I think the model, and it's what we try to do with Google Cloud, is when you disconnect the cloud infrastructure, where is the data, how the data is computed, with the software, when the hyperscaler will accept to have the SaaS applications able to be compatible with other players, like, for example, we work with VMware in completely sovereign model. And for us, it's a model that's very makes sense. But when you have no choice, because if you select a solution, you have to take vertically the cloud, which is imposed by the SaaS provider, hyperscaler. This is something that need to be changed, because it will never be able to provide the full set. So if I take a collaborative tool, for example, why I will be imposed to have this cloud provider because it's the same supplier. If they want to be, I would say, sovereign, they have to prove, and for me in GAIA-X, it will be really the proof that they are GAIA-X compatible, that they will disconnect with open documented APIs, the different parts of their solutions. If they don't do so, I think by design, it won't be trusted, it won't be transparent, it won't be reversible. So this is for me a prerequisite of the capability for the hyperscaler to demonstrate that they want really to provide real sovereign solutions. And with Google Cloud, we have made the good agreement. But for the rest, let's see.
I have another really good question from the chat, which is, I have just high-level information about GAIA-X. Will there be either today or in the near future a presentation about the low-level technical realization of GAIA-X? Who wants to, who wants to jump in on that?
I can start if you're good. I can start. So absolutely having, so let me start by saying where are we with Gaia, and then I think it'll fall into place. So we have been founding the GAIA-X entity just a few weeks back, right? Officially, it took a while because it's a lengthy legal process. There has been happening a lot of technical work in technical committees, and I think Rafael alluded to that. Hundreds of people working on it. So there is a lot of material, let me say. But what was hard to do before we have the entity funded, and with that entity also a governance structure to kind of select out of this, mass of technical discussions, let me say, what is now the important ones, what makes up the core of the Gaia architecture, and so on and so forth. So that's why I understand that the current technical discussions are not very good accessible when it comes to Gaia. But this will heavily improve over the next month, because we are now having that structure, we're having the people in place that run the structure, etc., etc. Nevertheless, I think what is going on and what is really tangible is that you can see things like the sovereign cloud stack, things like what we drive with OVH, a platform that is according to what we know today, what will be Gaia, right? And sometimes we get a discussion to say, well, is that now Gaia or is it not? And my answer is then always, well, it's what Gaia is today. I hope that Gaia tomorrow is going to be something different than what it is today, because that's a signal for a lively ecosystem, technology platform that evolves. So cutting a long answer short, there's a lot of material. Getting to it is very difficult. It will improve. Nevertheless, if you want to look at what the best or good interpretations of that are, look at a few kind of examples, and then it'll evolve over the next month, and will more and more align as we have the governance structure in place.
Yeah, Max mentioned Sovereign Cloud Stack project. That's an open source project, and you will find all information on the net. It's scs.community. If you go there, or if you use your favorite search engine and look for Sovereign Cloud Stack, you will find it. So this one is the low-level infrastructure and platform technology. And like Max said, it may be too much information. We need to do a better work of curating that. But open source people, I guess, are used to digging through piles of data that they find.
All right. Sadly, we are already near the end, guys. So I would like to end with two questions in one, if we can do it like that. So maybe we can talk a little bit about the fact that we are maybe still thinking way too small. Isn't it just about Europe? Isn't it way bigger already? And if it is, how do we get started?
Who should start?
Who wants to dive in?
Well, okay, I start. I think the European values that we've mentioned in this discussion, the desire for sovereignty, is an international desire. Everybody likes that. If you're in China or in the US, you like it as well. So in a way, it's an opportunity for sort of a made in Europe 2.0, where we create digital products that adhere to those values, right? And that make sure that these values are implanted into these products. Not healthy smoking, right? But maybe no smoking and other pleasures that we can create. And I think in Europe, we're very good at doing this. I think we're only at the very early phases of the digital age. I think we're still in this dirty phase of technology. Every disruption sort of starts with a dirty phase, like, say, cars. Right? They had a feature that everybody wanted, but they were stinkers, right? And we had no rules on how to drive on the roads, right? And we killed each other's like crazy. And this went on until the 70s, where we had, alone in Germany, I think we had 40,000 deaths on the roads. Now down to 3,500. So then you optimize, you make things better and safer, and then comes some disruption where the technology really becomes good. For everything digital, we're in this very early stage. And we have very dirty means of handling the data. And what we're discussing here is the optimization phase. And there's a lot of potential for disruption. So for my agency for disruptive innovation, I'm very excited about the possibilities that are in front of us. And I'm excited to be able to support some of them.
Great. Michel, would you like to add something to that, to the end?
Yeah, very quickly, I just want to say that first, we don't, as OVHcloud, things too small. And with we are investing massively. We are among the top 10 worldwide cloud players, and we're investing hundreds of millions of euros in our R&D, in our capacity. And so today, I just announced last week, for example, we have 2 data centers now. We double our data centers in Singapore. We just double the number of data centers we have in Australia. We have a huge investment in India. So today, yeah, of course, compared to some giants, it seems small, but it's not. And the ambition is there. And I do believe that a collaboration with T-Systems, for example, other players, will able to aggregate enough capacity to be ambitious, big, with the same humility, of course, of being the willingness and the ambition to bring value to our customers. The second point I want to say that is, of course, this is very important for Europe, but what we see today and the feedback we got from all the areas of the world is that data protection, data sovereignty is not anymore a European concern. And maybe Europe has been really a leader. GDPR, all these type of things seems to be now old, but in fact, it's a minority in the world. And we see that in Singapore, in Japan, in Korea, in California, this is becoming a major concern. And even in the US, the Chamber of the Representative organized meetings now about what does it mean about the data sovereignty and for the people, for the individual, for the citizens. So no, I do believe today that on the contrary, we may be where, I would say in advance, and now we are ambitious. So it's not a too small thinking approach, not at all. On the contrary.
That is why I really enjoy that partnership with OVH, right? Because I also think that that is not a European concept. That is not something that should sit within Europe, right? I'm very happy that something that was started off out of 2 countries in Europe, France and Germany, I think they were kind of accelerating the first discussions around that, has become a true European motion now. But I think the problems that we are solving are global. And I think also the way how we solve them, they will be applicable, that's the word I was looking for, applicable in a global sense, because we are not solving it with another solution that's a one-off that is better in sovereignty and then you roll it out, because that's not the answer. The answer is that we, as we all discussed, that we will have multiple places, and it allows you to do adjustments that are required for the local culture and needs. And just look at what's, for instance, happening if you're a little bit familiar with the needs with the needs that each of the different countries and regions have when it comes to autonomous driving, right? A highly tech area where there's a lot of tech involved to establish autonomous driving capabilities, but it's not a global thing. I mean, there are parts of it that are global, but the way how data is handled, the way how security must be met is something that will remain also local to make it usable for the people that are actually there, because the politicians of a country reflect what the people of that, what the citizens of that country want or region. And so that's why I think it is definitely a thing that has the global potential. I think the way how we set up will allow us to capture that global market. But I also think walk before you run, as they say, right? So I think it's a very important thing that we get accelerating now in this, for us in our core markets, and then move on from there. So that's, but as I said, Michel is one step ahead with his global platform, and that's why we're having a great partnership there.
What a wonderful ending. I would absolutely love to thank Rafael Laguna de la Vera as well as Michel Paulin. Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure. Such an captivating and interesting talk. I enjoyed it a lot. Big thanks always to you, Max.
Thank you.
Once again, it was a pleasure.
Thank you guys for coming. It was great talking to you.